Up to you guys.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first day of our White Hat Technologies second annual Cybersecurity Bootcamp. My name is Marina Roberts, and I will be the moderator for the bootcamp this year. Our sponsor for today's session is GB Burgas, and our speaker is Mr. Ritchie Etwaru. Mr. Etwaru has over 25 years experience in new frontier technologies, focusing on innovative solutions. As the CEO of Mobius, the company places emphasis on machine learning and computer vision. So if you have any question during this session, you can place it in the chat and we will address it at the end during the Q&A segment. So Mr. Etwaru, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Well, good morning. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. I did not prepare specific slides and presentation. I thought I would keep this conversational. So I'll give you a brief introduction, and then we can figure out what it is that everybody's interested in. Whatever you're interested, I'm happy to chat about it. I've been in the technology sphere for probably about 25 years. I've done everything from cloud to AI to desktop computing to mainframe. I've built several businesses, rolled up a couple of companies, took one public, stuff like that. So it's a small group of people, and I wasn't sure what we're looking forward to here, but I'm happy to engage in anything that anyone wants to know about technology or AI or anything in general. I think we've got Horace, Sally, and Yannick. Anything you guys interested in learning about? I'm happy to answer questions or just riff on a topic.
Hi, Horace here from St. Lucia. Good morning to everyone. I would like to know how you got started, and additionally, what would you recommend to parents to get their children started in that field?
Good morning, Horace. Greetings from US in New Jersey. So I think I'll tell you a little bit about how I get started, and that will be probably different from how you may want to get started with students, with kids and students today. So I started in high school in Guyana. I'm 47 years old, so I was born in Guyana in South America. Been living in the US for 30 years now. And I started because there was a class given where there was a computer science class to take and to learn about computers and learn about computer science. There is a distinction between what I was doing and what I think other kids were doing with computers at the time. And that distinction is most people were playing with computers, so they were a consumer of computers, while I was learning how to build with computers. So I was a producer of technology. And I think that was the delineating line between thinking about computers as someone who consumes the app, consumes the technology, and someone who actually tries to build it to make it a business for others to buy. And so today, if you think about young children today, that maybe I think every young child today is playing with technology somehow. As a parent, and I have two boys, one's 4, one's 5.5. What I try to do is I try to explain to them that there's a difference between being a consumer of technology, which is you're consuming it, you're playing with it, you're doing things with it, and then understanding how it works and start to become a producer, to go in that producer mindset, to say, how does this work? Can I build one like this? I wonder if I will to build something like this, what would I build? How does this inspire me to build something else? That mindset shift from consuming to producing is probably, I would say that's probably the most important thing that changed my relationship with technology. There are many other things that happened after that that led me down a path where I wanted to study math more, study electronics more. Those are not things that kids have to study today. Today, they will have to study software engineering. They would have to study models and AI, et cetera. But I would reckon that that is the main insight that I would give to a teacher or a parent if you're trying to cultivate children to have a career in technology. The other thing I would say is that there's a middle ground in between that could be misinterpreted. So, for example, someone may take Google Analytics and build some sort of really quick small system out of it, and that could be misinterpreted as producing technology. It's not necessarily producing, that's rearranging technology to kind of make something new. That's the equivalent of, let's say you're thinking about wood as a raw material. You want to get into the lumber business or the building business. People who take wood and build houses, they're consumers of the lumber industry. People who take wood and arrange it into different things, they may feel like they're producing, but they're not really producing. The producers are the people who go cut the tree, cut the wood, ship it, and bring it and get it into the store. Same thing with technology. In order to get the exponential benefits from it, where you get 1,000x return or you get 10,000x return, you got to go down that rabbit hole and figure out, okay, so this is the thing that I'm using. Who built this thing? How did they build it? Oh, they built it using other things that somebody else built. Who's that somebody else? How did they build it? What did they do? And when you get to the end of that rabbit hole to understand the whole supply chain of the assembly of technology, how does everything inside of it work, all the way to the electricity, then you have a point of view to say, I have a unique understanding of the world now. I see a problem that I could fix. And by the way, that problem can't be fixed with the stuff that everybody's consuming. That problem could be fixed with something downstream that I go make something that matters. So I know that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but it's an important question. And you forced me to think in the moment about my childhood and about what was the difference. I could talk about it more, but if I would have filtered it down, that would be the insight.
Yeah, thanks, man. Much appreciated.
No problem, Horace. Other questions? And Horace, if you wanted to ask more questions, you and I can just talk. Doesn't matter.
Okay, I have quite a number of questions that I want to ask on.
Yeah, man, let's go.
At one time, honestly, I think I wanted to go into computer science and technology. I was, for most of my career, part of a telecommunications company dealing with mobile coverage and stuff. And I saw the changes in the technology due to the advancement of technology, where, okay, for instance, in the beginning, for you to test network coverage, you'd have somebody in a vehicle with a whole bunch of equipment driving around for days, and then the equipment is taken and it has to be analyzed by another group of people. And when I left that field about 3 years ago, it had gotten to a point where essentially people are pulling information from the individual's phones, the coverage levels, reception levels, speed, download speeds, upload speeds, and stuff like that. All of these things were essentially being calculated in real time. So effectively, almost the testing and maintenance part of the telecoms network had shifted. And by such, a lot of people effectively lost their jobs. So the changes are there and the changes are coming. And I think more importantly, the changes are inevitable. So I think we as humans, if you want to call us that, we have to adapt. But I think for us in the smaller countries, for us in the islands, I don't know, for some reason, well, not for some reason, obviously because we're in a small island, we seem to get it last. We seem to see the benefits last. We hear about it, we watch BBC. BBC has this very interesting program, Click, and they always go for something interesting in technology every weekend. And the technologies have been tested, they've been rolled out, and we don't hear about it. So for us in the islands, for us in the small islands, what do you think we should do to be aware or to keep in touch with what's happening?
It's a fantastic question, Horace. I've done the same keynote at 3 different audiences in the Caribbean, one to the CARICOM leadership, one at a Visionary Summit, and then most recently in Jamaica to the MICO College for Teachers. And the thesis, I'll answer your question from different dimensions. It's a valid, it's not even a question, it's a conversation starter, right? First, every single job that has ever been invented or has ever been envisioned is going to disappear eventually, right? Think about horse and buggy, right? Cars came and commoditized that job. You know, the phone operators, right? Networks came and commoditized those jobs. So jobs are going to be commoditized. And it's just the nature of society. If you think about it from a macro perspective, there is an insight that you look at it from a big time standpoint, meaning if you look at it 100 years in the back and 100 years forward, which is a good way to think about thematics and how technology changes, is to look at it from a multi-century perspective, and you'll see the macro curve or the macro trend. So we went from what was called manual workers to knowledge workers. This was a brilliant management scholar, Peter Drucker, who sort of laid out this thesis that you'd go from manual workers to knowledge workers. Manual workers worked with, you know, strength in their hands and physical materials. My grandfather, for example, was a manual worker. He worked in a sugar factory, right? To knowledge workers today, where most of us work with computers and information. Not that manual workers went away completely, but you know, a lot of manual workers' jobs were constricted, and there's a lot of knowledge work now. And that was because the motor was invented, and the motor sort of commoditized manual labor around the same time the PC was invented, which introduced information sharing, which gave rise to the telecom networks. We're going through a similar shift today, which is AI is starting to commoditize knowledge work and starting to introduce some new form of work. And that new form of work I call visionary work. Visionary work as in you have to be more creative, you have to be more imaginative, because the ability to build things is being commoditized more and more. The barrier to entry into commerce or into startup or into entrepreneurship is falling. And so that's always going to happen. The fact that that we're aware of it gives us one leg up already, right? So being aware of the fact that when you're born, the dominant style of work at the time when you were born is probably not going to be the dominant style of work by the time you're ready to enter the workforce. That's a 20-year period. And so you kind of have to arc your intent and your career trajectory almost 10 to 20 years out. And you should do that as an adult as well. Even if you're 30 or 40, you should be building your skills for what will come 10 to 20 years in the future. This way, insulating yourself from the natural sort of evolution of jobs. Second is, I'll talk a little bit about, you know, these remote sort of geographies that tend to don't get things at the same time, and tell you why I think now is a really interesting time for the remote geographies. So without a doubt, it took a while for certain of the major inventions to get to different parts of the globe. Metal, for example, I was born in Guyana. You know, metal got to Guyana about 50 years after it was in Europe. You know, just the ability to have iron to build things or aluminum as opposed to wood. Guyana got aluminum a lot faster than the rest of the Caribbean because Guyana had bauxite And so, we had to learn the trade. Electricity took about 20, 30 years to get to the rest of the world, telephones, computers, etc. In the industry of the future that's coming, which is AI, everybody's in on day one. If you have a computer and you have a credit card, you can have access to AI today. You open up your computer, connect to the internet, open an Amazon Web Services account, and there are cloud-based services to build AI models, train AI models, run AI models, test AI models. There are data sets to buy to build AI models, and all you need is a credit card. You'd argue that some parts of the world don't have credit card. But while AI is not available to everybody on the planet immediately on day zero, it's available to way more of the planet than when compared to something like electricity or something like the computer or the internet or iron or cars, all the other major inventions that came before this. And so I see this as an opportunity for the second and third world countries to finally play in the game, right, from round one, so to speak. So I think it's a little bit different there, Horace. The other thing that I would say is AI arrived at the awareness of AI arrived at such an abrupt speed. It's certainly been ongoing for about 15 years, envisioned almost 30, 40 years ago. But the first major paper was written in 1986 around multi-layer perceptrons by Hinton, which is one of the godfathers of AI. And most recently, there was transformer papers, which are really big, written by the DeepMind folks at Google. Apart from maybe 250,000 people, about 250,000 people in the world who actually understand the science and the technology to a level of detail where they're sort of artisan with it, where they can really massage and manipulate it. Everybody else is starting from the same level of awareness. That's 99.99% of America knows exactly what 100% of St. Lucia knows, which is nothing. And so with this particular paradigm, I feel like everybody's in on day zero, and everybody's entering at the entry level 101 class. So it's almost a fair race on AI. I know that is not visible and materialized as how I am sort of haphazardly describing it, almost in a sort of a naive way, but it is way better than radio or electricity or cars or motors. You can get it with you can get access to it with a lot less resources, and you can participate in it as an expert, on a competitive field where most of the people in the world are starting exactly at the same place. Does that make sense to you, Horace? Like, do you feel that narrative is valid in that it is way better this time around than it was the last couple of times?
No, definitely, because even on my Instagram stream, I'm constantly getting those variations of classes you can join or things you can log into and gain some knowledge, which is true. And I try to pass it on to my son as well and tell him, hey, you're home on vacation, keep yourself busy instead of just playing games and read up on this, which is true. I wouldn't say the counter, but I would say some of us, we seem to be more interested in those things than maybe everybody else around us. Whilst my impression is in probably the first world countries, it would probably be easier to get support groups, but that's no excuse, as you say, because if you want to learn the information, if you realize it's a necessity, and as you said earlier on, and I think I'm a living testament of that, the job market is changing. And the key thing is you have to prepare yourself. You have to be able to One, the ability to relearn, the ability to shift focus, the ability to adapt, the ability and willingness to say, I'm going to sacrifice some time and I'm going to learn this and I'm going to see how, even if I may not see where I am going to utilize this knowledge 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, but knowing that eventually you will, something is going to come up where you have to utilize that knowledge. I think that is important as well, very important. And thanks for that too.
Yeah. So I'll give you some perspective on that. I've done some work in South America. Nisa and I, who arranged this, are friends, by the way. So that's how I come I end up here. And I've done some work in Asia as well. And I have to share with you that it's a percentage thing versus it's a percentage thing and a population thing. So what you're describing is ambition. And I will tell you that in the US, let's say we have 300 million people, probably 1% of people has the ambition to disproportionately outperform sort of the arc of their life, right? If you were born here, you kind of have an arc. But if you want to outperform that disproportionately, 1% of people have the ambition. Which is, if you have 300 million, that's like 3 million people that have the ambition, right? And as a result, you have 3 million people that are aiming for, multi-millionaire, billionaire status. And that's a process where, 1% of that 1% actually make it. So of that 3 million, you'll see, 30,000 people that become multimillionaires with, 30 that become billionaires or something like that. That percentage is the same in Trinidad. It's the same in St. Lucia. It's the same in Jamaica. It's the same in Suriname. It's the same in Argentina. It's about 1% of society that has the ambition to outperform their art. What's the amount of people in St. Lucia, if you estimate it for me, Horace?
170,000 to 180,000 people.
Okay, so let's oversimplify it. Let's say it's 200,000 people, right? So 1% of 200,000 people is 20,000, right? Am I doing it right? No, that's 2,000.
2,000, yeah.
And then, so you got 2,000 people that have the ambition to outperform their curve. And you got, of that, 1%, which is 20 people that are going to generate disproportionate income. So it may feel like, in the smaller population countries, it may feel like we don't have the ambition, our people are these are the words that others would use, our people are lazy. That's not my perspective. It's just because of the size of the population. I'll tell you, there are hundreds of millions of people in the US that are not ambitious, that are sitting on the opportunity of being in this country, seeing the technologies coming, having access to it and having proximity to it, and simply not taking advantage of it. The reason why it feels so magnified in the small countries and the small populations, you just don't have the population where the percentage just doesn't play out. So that's the first thing I would offer. I wouldn't be in dismay when I'm in a small population. The second thing I would say, like, for example, what's the name of the wallet company that was founded by a guy from Trinidad? There is, I want to say, something pay.
WePay.
WePay,
Yes.
right? That's from a guy from Trinidad, right? But it's a small percentage that actually come out of the small populations, and there are others of people who have founded companies and things of that nature. So one, don't let the absolute numbers lie to you. Look at the percentages. Second is, there are some disadvantages. The two types of disadvantages that I see is community. If you think about Silicon Valley for a second, and if you're living in Silicon Valley, you live in a community where there's a certain language set, there's a certain mindset, there's a certain resource set that increases the likelihood that that ambition infects you, that you pick up the narrative, that you pick up the activities, that you pick up the habits. And so community is one of the things that I think, is missing in some of the parts of the world, where community increases that percentage of people who can catch on to that ambition and ride the wave, so to speak. And that's why it's important to kind of do things like this in St. Lucia and in other parts of the world, where when you find like-minded people that are doing the unexpected, it increases the likelihood that you have confidence in yourself to do the unexpected. Nobody wants to be one crazy person on an island by themselves, right? You kind of need that community. So I think that's one of the disadvantages of the other geographies where community is not there. So that's one. The second, I would say, from a disadvantage point of view, is there's not the it's almost like there's a cultural distraction in certain geographies, which can make you think that you have ambition that can get you there. And I'll give you an example. I'll use Ghana, for example. Okay. Ghana, if you want to be ambitious culturally, there are only two things that can kind of, well, there's three actually. I'll tell you the third one. It's not the most popular one. There's two things that you can do if you have high ambition. One is you can become the star cricketer, right? You can play cricket like crazy, and hopefully you become a good cricketer and you make money that way. Or the other is you could become a singer. You could become a soca artist or a chutney artist or a reggae artist, and that's how you get to the top. That's how you make it big. The third is you could get into crime. That's sort of a cultural, societal thing where people feel like because others have only gotten through a certain medium, that's the only medium that's there. In Jamaica, obviously, everybody's trying to be a reggae star, right? Or a sprinter. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject and say what you're saying there, that applies to the Caribbean as a whole, eh? Not just Guyana.
Yes. I was using Guyana because I'm from Guyana. So in case I was offending anyone, I'm offending my own country.
No, it's the Caribbean.
And so you don't have good examples of people who might go, this is something I can do because someone that looked like me, someone that sounds like me, someone that eats the same food I ate, someone that dances just like me, someone that listens to the same music that I listen to, made it, without being a singer or a cricketer or crime, right? And so what is missing is that magnification of success in non-familiar careers, so to speak. And this is why, again, for example, there's a guy named Kirk Anthony in Barbados and Jamaica that puts together a tech beach conference every year where he brings in people from the Caribbean diaspora across the world that are involved in technology, and puts up a conference for them and invites the children and the students in Jamaica to come in for free, just to hear from people who look like them, sound like them, eat like them, dance like them, that are doing things other than music or sports or crime. And so those are the two things that are missing: community and cultural examples. I think to foster that motivation and that ambition. But Horace, I wouldn't say that one geography of people are less ambitious or less progressive than others. That's a percentage and population thing.
Yeah, cool, man. Cool.
Any other questions or curiosities about technology, careers, industry, markets? Happy to chat about anything.
I have a question. So you said that community and
Examples.
cultural examples is the most important thing. So if you are living in a space that you feel like you don't have those things, what can you do as a young person? Because I think a lot of people, because they don't see the examples, they kind of limit themselves, you know? So outside of like going to university, which I think is a traditional route, what else can you do to get into a space where you see cultural examples and have a community?
So it's a lot better now than it was 20 years ago. Well, or 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, I was 31 years ago, I was living in Ghana, right? I didn't have access to newspapers from outside the country. I didn't have access to radio content or programming from outside the country. Crap, I didn't have access to news outside of my village. You were sort of isolated. Today, the internet is the equalizer. I would venture to say that if I were to share my screen right now and go on the internet, within 5 minutes, I could find 5 Jamaican millionaires across the world. I mean, we can experiment with it if you want. Within 5 minutes, I could find, 5 Bajan people that are senior vice presidents at Fortune 500 companies. So I appreciate the question. I don't buy into the difficulty of being able to find the cultural examples. I think what people are looking for is they're looking for cultural examples that are living in the island, in the village that they happen to live in, so that they can believe that it's actually possible. I think that's the gap that needs to be bridged, which is, look, yeah, I understand that that person is living in the US and that's why they were able to advance. But at least it's the same person that looks like you. It's the same person that sounds like you. Way better than thinking, if you came from a place, you can't perform. Now, the second part is probably the difficult part, which is if you're stuck in the place, why can't you perform? Now, I will tell you that 90% of my information consumption, 90%, especially post-COVID, of my meeting with other people is done right here from my home with a computer, electricity, and an internet connection. So I could be living in the Bahamas on Cat Island, which is not even the big islands, off in the middle of nowhere, right on the beach with an internet connection and my computer, and still generate disproportionate value. And that's because my mindset is one of, and maybe this will be helpful, my mindset is one of, the boundaries of the country that I live in don't dictate the boundaries of my potential. It just happens to be a line that somebody drew somewhere, right? That says this is where you live. But everything else transcends that line. The only thing that doesn't transcend that line is a passport. So that mindset of recognizing that the world is accessible through the internet and all information is at your fingertips and you're not disproportionately disadvantaged in any way is a mindset shift. I've had this conversation with Nisa multiple times around how do you get people cognitively past the borders of the island or the borders of the country? And so I think it was, it's Maria that asked that question, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Who asked that question?
Yes, it was me, Marina.
Right. Maria, I would say the single mental hack, I would say, is to recognize that the drawing of St. Lucia, those lines around the island, are not the lines that define your potential.
Yes, I totally agree with that because in my own experience, especially during the pandemic, I have built communities in so many different spaces now because I have a crafting hobby, and the people that I connect with on that, they don't live in my country. And it's
Right.
because I have that mindset shift that wherever the people are, that's where I want to meet them, right? Even if it's in a virtual space.
Yeah, look, the quality of your voice, the quality of Horace's voice, the quality of your video while you had it on is no different from if I'm connecting with someone in San Francisco or someone in London. Like it's commoditized. Rochelle and Yannick could be in any part of the world right now. As a matter of fact, I didn't walk in here assuming that everybody on this call is from St. Lucia. You could have been from anywhere, right? And if I didn't tell you guys where I was from, I could have been somewhere in Brazil right now. It doesn't really matter. So a lot of what I was talking to Horace about earlier, and a lot of what I would espouse, is that this is the limitations are in our heads. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to be able to get past those limitations. I'm not saying it's a simple thing to do. By all means, it's not something that's trivial. But the awareness that that is actually the limitation is step one in going in the right direction, I think. All right, guys, I got about another 10 minutes. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm responding to a text in the meantime. So I'll summarize, and I'll start with the summary from Horace's set of questions. Summary number one is that it's the different mindset shifts. Mindset shift number one is to shift from being a consumer of technology to being a producer of technology. And that requires that you look behind the app or look behind the website. If you're using Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or Google or whatever the case may be, that curiosity to go, how does this thing work? Simple things like, how does a button work? Who writes a button? Why does the button change color when I push it? To be able to look all the way down the supply chain. And once you understand that supply chain, to then look at that and say how I may solve problems. That's probably one of the mindset shifts. The second is around the pace of innovation and the arrival of innovation and how that impacts jobs. And I would say that there you have to assume that the job that your parents did is not going to be the job that you did. And so you got to arc yourself 10 to 20 years in the future. And in there, we had a conversation around AI being available today at day zero to a broader population of the planet than when compared to things like electricity or the motor or automotives or vaccines, for example, right? Or pharmaceutical drugs. It all took time to get to the edge of the world, but AI, everybody's in on day zero. We also talked a little bit about the fact that it's not just that everybody's on day zero, everybody's also in entry-level class, because there's a small amount of people that actually understands all of the detail. And as a result, everybody who's starting on day zero is equally as misinformed or uninformed as everybody else. There's a very small percentage of the world that has expertise. And then we talked a little bit about mindset, the percentage of people that have ambition and how that's relative to a small population and how you can misjudge ambition. I think ambition is equal across all populations. But the downsides are things like communities and cultural examples. And then we talked a little bit around that sort of stuck within the boundaries of a country, so to speak, and to really do the mindset shift to shift outside. Literally, like take a map of the island, look at those lines and go, man, up until today, I thought these lines defined my potential. But now I understand that they don't. They don't mean anything other than my passport can't go past those lines, right? So that's how I'd kind of wrap up the last hour of discussion here. I'll put it out one more time. Any other questions before I kind of jump here? And by the way, I'm highly available on LinkedIn and stuff. Anybody who wants to send me a message, I'm happy to engage afterwards.
Yes, I have another question. So, on the news within the past few months, there's been a lot of talk about AI being the scary thing, you know, and that we should prepare ourselves for the robots taking over. So, is that like unfounded, or should we just like embrace this new wave of technology?
Well, as I said, every new invention, from you know, from fire all the way through, triggered a transformation of the nature of work. And this is one of the things I missed in my summary. We talked about how manual workers went to knowledge workers, and how knowledge workers will go to visionary workers, right? There is no question that every new invention that arrives is going to trigger a transformation of work. I don't subscribe to the notion that AI is going to somehow replace more jobs than the computer did, or more jobs than the motor did, which introduced factories and production. That's just not the way it plays out. And I'll talk to you a little bit about how it plays out in a second. But I would say that it is valid to have all points of views discussed, and that we are actually really in a really good place right now because of all the point of views that are being discussed relative to sort of the last waves of automation or augmentation. So every invention had the evangelist point of view, right? The person who believes this is the best thing that happened to society, and we're about to transform from Homo sapiens to some new version of humankind. Every new invention has the optimistic point of view, the realistic point of view, the pessimistic point of view, and then on the left-hand side, the alarmists, right? Oh my God, this thing's going to take over, blah, 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 blah. It's important to have those point of views because there are unintended consequences from every new massive invention. I mean, think about the internet, for example, and the amount of the spike in vanity that it created and the pop-in addiction that was created, particularly with social media. We didn't have these conversations at the beginning of the internet. Think about if we were thinking about ethics at the beginning of the internet, or we were thinking about fairness and bias and mental health at the beginning of the internet, we might have been able to avoid some of the unintended consequences that we see today. So with AI, we're certainly having the conversations at the right time, right? Or at least we're having the conversations way earlier, way broader than we did in the things that came before. Same thing with motors and factories. Maybe we could have avoided some of the CO2 emissions issues that we had if we had these point of views so early in the evolution of the technology. So that's a good thing. Second point of view I'll offer in the context of the question is that the people who lost their jobs to computers didn't lose their jobs to computers. They lost their jobs to people who were using computers. And I would say that AI is not going to take a doctor's job. A doctor who's using AI is going to take the job of a doctor who's not using AI. And so I see the technology as a new tool in one's tool belt to be able to take advantage of and use. And it's inevitable. It's the cat's already out the bag. We can't put the genie back in the lamp, so to speak, or whatever metaphor is appropriate there. So the only thing that I see is to embrace it and to compete with it and to be competitive with it and to be commercial and productive with it. As far as the piece, however, of upgrading jobs, I do think AI is going to move faster at commoditizing jobs than certain other technologies, such as the internet or such as electricity or such as motors. And so there's definitely the concern there around like how fast some of this commoditization is going to happen. But that's still going to be in pockets, right? Like right now, if you are a writer or a copy editor, you probably want to start thinking about a new skill. Or if you are, a graphic artist, you probably want to start thinking about another skill. But if you're a school teacher, you're not that much at risk. AI is going to augment the school teacher. It's not going to replace the school teacher. If you're a doctor, you're not at that risk. AI is going to augment the doctor. It's going to make better doctors out of the doctors that we have. So there are certain pockets. And then the other thing that you mentioned was robots. And when you mix AI with robotics, that's when it's kind of scary. And it's scary because of all the precognitive loading that we have from the movie industry, right? Where robots come and take over the world. I'll say there are more robots in the world than humans right now. That may startle you. There are so many things that have robotics in them that we just don't understand. Every airplane, every car, every factory, every assembly line, all the little vacuums in the world that are going around and automatically vacuuming the floors for people, so you don't have to sweep with a pointer broom anymore, right? Robotics have helped tremendously in relieving us of some of the things that don't really, they're not the things that we enjoy or the things that we definitely want to do. And I think that's going to continue. I mean, there are so many things in my life that I do today that I would love a robot to do. Like, for heaven's sake, I pay a human to mow my lawn, or I mow my lawn myself sometimes. I'd love a robot to do that. Why would I not want to do that? When I go on a long drive, I'd love for my car to be more robotic to get me there. Where the fear comes from is two places. One is we tend to complicate performance with competency, where we see that a robot can throw a ball and catch it, and we assume, oh my God, it can shoot a gun. That's not the way intelligence works. There's nothing sentient about the intelligence where you think that because a robot can do X, it can probably do Y, because most humans that do X can do Y. That we're thinking that because it could perform at one function, it probably has competencies around every other function that is similar to that one function. That's not the way AI works. AI is very specialized and very narrow. If a robot can do one thing, chances are that's the only thing it can do. And the second is this notion of actual intelligence, like an actual existing cognitive object that exists, that has personhood and has awareness. All of this stuff is just mathematics. Every robot, every AI, every algorithm is just math. I'll give you an example. I'll use something that's accessible to everyone. Let's use ChatGPT, for example. If you go into ChatGPT and you go, what's the color of the sky? I guarantee you it's going to come back and say blue. And you're like, how did this thing know that the sky is blue, right? It's just statistics, which is a subset of mathematics. It has read from a corpus of information, and most of the times when a conversation was had about the sky, the answer was blue. What we don't know from a statistical mathematical perspective was that there were a bunch of other colors that the model has to choose from, and what it was doing, it was choosing the highest probability. There was black, there was orange, there was gray, there was white, there was a bunch of other colors. It just happened that based on what you asked, blue was the most likely. Because if you say, what's the color of the sky at sunset, it'll change the answer from blue to orange, because based on the prompt, the statistical probability is higher. Now, that's a really simple example, but if you abstract that out to asking it a very complex question, and it comes back with what seems like a pretty sophisticated answer, which could only come from some cognitive sentient intelligence, that's not the case. It's just math that's predicting every single word that's there based on a probability curve. That should at least help you understand that there's no intelligence that's actually sitting in it. It's just mathematics running statistics. I say embrace the hell out of the technology. At a minimum, if it's going to kill us all, at least you'll do better before it kills us all. I don't think it's going to kill us all. I think it'll actually advance us to a place that's beyond the state of living today. Well, that wraps up my time. I really appreciate the questions and the awareness that was shared here today. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I'm always happy to kind of re-engage with the Caribbean and share points of views. It helps me feel like I'm helping in some way.
Okay, Mr. Etwaru, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us, and we look forward to engaging with you sometime in the future.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.